The beta test is over. The world's first VR, virtual reality MMORPG, Sword Art Online, is about to go live. Former beta tester Kirigaya Kazuto puts on his nerve gear and gets ready for the official launch. At 1 p.m. on Sunday, November 6, 2022, he is transported to the Town of Beginnings on the first floor of the virtual world Aincrad, under the name Kirito, his avatar. Klein, another player, notices that Kirito knows his way around and asks for help after confirming that he is indeed one of the lucky 1,000 beta testers. After showing Klein the ropes while hunting boars, the two decide to part ways, since Klein has a pizza already ordered and on its way. But they find the logout button missing from the menu and figure it must be some sort of bug. That is, until they're transported to the center of town where the game's creator, Kayaba Akihiko, dispels their suspicions. It's not a bug, it's a feature. He goes on to explain that removing the nerve gear each player has on will send a powerful microwave signal and fry their brain, should they choose to remove it or if their health points reach 0. The only way to survive and log out is to clear all 100 floors by defeating the boss at the end of each before moving on to the next. With that, every player's avatar transforms to reflect their real-life appearance, and panic ensues. Kirito asks Klein to come with him to the next village, but Klein stays behind since he can't abandon his friends, and they part ways. Determined to clear the game, Kirito knows what he must do: become as strong as possible and survive. The first floor still hasn't been cleared a month later, while over 2,000 of the original 10,000 players have already lost their lives. Some of the stronger ones have a meeting to discuss how to find and tackle the boss. A player named Diabel reveals that his party discovered the boss room. Their plan is to lead a raid group comprised of multiple parties of 6 to overpower the boss. As a solo player, Kirito searches for a party to join, but he's out of luck, until he spots another solo player, Asuna, and suggests they form a party of 2. But before they can get ready, a player named Kibao asserts that ex-beta testers need to apologize for going on ahead and leaving the new players behind. Another player, Agil, stands up, putting Kibao in his place. The ex-beta testers are the ones writing and handing out guidebooks for free. The raid group sets out to face Ilfang the Kobold Lord. Using the guidebook's information, everything goes smoothly. That is, until the boss draws a Nodachi instead of a Talwar sword. This wasn't in the beta. Kirito tries to warn Diabel, but isn't fast enough. The boss makes quick work of him. Kirito tries to give him some health pots, but he refuses, admitting to being an ex-beta tester who's after the rare item given to the player who lands the final blow. Kirito and Asuna begin their assault on the boss, but one mistake sends him flying into her. Agil steps in, holding off the boss until they recover. Then Kirito delivers the final blow. It's over. The raid group begins to rejoice, everyone except for Kaibao, who accuses Kirito of being an ex-beta tester. To everyone's surprise, Kirito bursts out laughing. His demeanor changes. Now overconfident and cocky, he retorts that he's nothing like the other beta testers. He's the player who cleared the most floors during the beta. He's not a cheater, he's a beater. Asuna catches up to Kirito, who admits she's strong and advises her to join a guild instead of limiting herself by playing solo. Some months later, in an 11th floor tavern, the Moonlit Black Cats Guild raises a glass to thank Kirito for saving their lives. Despite being a solo player, he accepts their offer to join their guild, but hides his true level from the members. The guild leader messages him the next day, explaining that Sachi went missing. When Kirito finds her, she proposes that they run away. Instead of fighting, they could wait until someone else clears the game. He assures her that the guild is strong enough, that she shouldn't fear death, while making a promise to himself to protect them. The rest of the guild decides to go tackle a dungeon, while the leader buys them a house. They stumble across a hidden room, with only a chest in the center. Kirito suspects it's a trap, and tries to warn them. As the door seals shut, their teleportation crystals are useless. They're surrounded by mobs. One by one, Kirito watches helplessly as his fellow guild members die. Sachi turns to him, but he can't make out her last words. Kirito learns of a rare item that resurrects a fallen comrade, but it only drops from a secret boss that spawns on Christmas Day. Traveling to the spawn point, he finds Klein's guild has been following him, offering to help. But those aren't the only pursuers. The Divine Dragons Alliance shows up, and Klein promises to hold them off, giving Kirito enough time to find the boss and defeat him solo. After returning to find Klein's group still alive, Kirito tosses the rare item in the snow, telling Klein to keep it. It's of no use to him now. The moonlit black cats have been dead for months, and the item is only effective for 10 seconds after a player dies. Back at the inn, Kirito receives a recorded message. It's from Sachi, explaining how grateful she was for his friendship and how she doesn't want him to blame himself for her inevitable death. Silica, a beast tamer, leaves her party after an argument with another member, Rosalia. She gets lost trying to find her way back to the town of Mish. Surrounded by a group of monsters in the forest, Silica's pet, Pina, steps in to protect her, sacrificing her life in the end. Without any healing crystals, Silica's odds are not looking good, but luck is on her side, as Kirito happens upon her and slays the circling foes. He asks Silica if the feather Pina dropped is a named item. It turns out it's her familiar's heart. Kirito tells her the rumor of a rare item that can revive any tamed beast within 3 days of its death, while promising to help her retrieve it. Rosalia mocks Silica back in town, assuming that they're heading to the Hill of Memories to revive Pina. Silica doesn't understand why she's such a vile player, so Kirito explains how some MMO players roleplay evil characters, but in SAO it's a different story. The cursor above a player's head turns orange when the player commits a crime, and turns red when they get a PK, player kill, which is murder under these circumstances. That night, Kirito hears someone outside of their room at the inn. They are being watched. The next morning, they port to floor 47, where the Hill of Memories is located. Silica wonders why he's helping her. To Kirito's embarrassment, he admits that she reminds him of his sister. Eventually, they find the item and decide to wait to revive Pina in town where it's safe. However, on the way back to the transporter, Kirito notices someone lying in wait. It's Rosalia. It turns out she's part of a PK guild, Titan's Hand, despite having a green cursor. She's the bait. Rosalia believes she was hunting them, but it was actually Kirito who was tracking her. Silver Flag's guild leader survived his guild's massacre, begging anyone who would listen to avenge his friends and put her in prison where she belongs. The rest of Titan's Hands come out of hiding, recognizing Kirito, dressed in black, one-handed sword, no shield. Attacking all at once doesn't even scratch him. At level 78, with enough battle regen bonuses, he's practically invincible. There's nothing Rosalia can do. Kirito transports her to prison and takes Silica back to town, apologizing for using her as bait. She revives Pina, and they part ways, promising to meet again someday. Asuna, now vice commander of the Knights of the Blood Oath, holds a meeting with the assault team on floor 56, going over boss-killing strategies. Asuna is adamant about her plan to lure the boss into town, but Kirito objects. She insists that NPCs aren't people. After all, they respawn. Aegil mentions the growing tension between them, reminding Kirito of the advice he gave her and how far she's come. A few weeks later, on floor 59, Asuna finds Kirito taking a nap in the shade of a tree. She tries lecturing him, but he insists that it's the optimal weather in Aincrad. It would be a waste not to enjoy it. Kirito wakes up to find Asuna fast asleep and decides to keep watch. She treats Kirito to a meal to thank him for making sure no one killed her while she slept. Someone screams, and they rush outside to see a player hanging from a balcony with a spear piercing his chest. Moments later, he's gone, dead, vanished. But nobody can die in a safe zone, and there isn't a red cursor in sight. They decide to investigate. Yoruko, the player who screamed, steps forward, claiming she was friends with the victim, Kynes. With the witness in tow, they retrieve the one thing that might give them some answers, the murder weapon. Aegil doubles as a night merchant and has a high enough appraisal skill to determine the weapon's owner. The spear was crafted by a player named Grimlock. Apparently, Yoruko recognizes the name and details the destruction of her old guild, Golden Apple. They found a rare ring and voted in favor of selling it. Griselda, the leader, tried to sell it and turned up dead, leaving her in-game husband, Grimlock, a widower. The third person who wanted to keep the ring, along with Yoruko and Kynes, was Schmidt, who left the guild to fight on the front lines with the Divine Dragons Alliance. Kirito figures there are only 3 possible ways to die in a safe zone: a fair duel, a bug, or an item or skill. But he rules out the last option, since the game system is fair and wouldn't contain anything that would violate the only safe place for players. They get Schmidt to meet with them, when Yoriko begins to freak out, inching ever closer to the window. Sitting on the sill, she reasons that Griselda is the only one with motive to kill. It must be her ghost seeking revenge, when suddenly her eyes widen and she falls from the second-floor window with a dagger in her back, dead. Kirito spots a cloaked figure watching from a nearby rooftop, but before catching up to the anonymous player, they use a teleportation crystal and escape. Schmidt starts spiraling, believing that Griselda's ghost has returned to seek revenge. That night, Kirito and Asuna sit on a bench, wondering if it was really Griselda's ghost. But why would a ghost need a teleportation crystal? Kirito is surprised that Asuna can cook. When she offers him some food, he fumbles, and the food disappears when it hits the ground. Kirito has an epiphany. He knows how they've been pulling off the killings. Schmidt visits Griselda's grave when 2 mysterious figures appear in front of him. Terrified, he confesses. After the vote, he found a teleportation crystal in his inventory, along with written instructions to bind it to the room Griselda was staying at, swearing he had no idea who gave him the orders. Kirito explains to Asuna that a player's health points can't drop to 0 inside a safe zone, but an item's durability can. Kain's armor lost all its durability, and right when it disintegrated, he used a crystal to teleport, creating a convincing enough death. Yoriko never turned around, so the dagger was already taking the durability of her cloak down to 0 the moment she fell out the window. Just when Schmidt finishes confessing and begging for forgiveness, 3 cloaked figures appear and paralyze him, members of the Laughing Coffin, a murder guild. However, they decide to depart when Kirito shows up at Griselda's grave. Asuna explains that when players marry in-game, their inventory and storage become shared between them. But what happens when one dies? Everything goes to the spouse, so the ring must still be in Grimlock's possession. It must have been him who hired Griselda's murderer. Asuna finds Grimlock lurking in the forest near the gravesite. He tries to justify why he had to kill her, revealing that they were married in the real world too. She changed when they began playing SAO, and he just couldn't take it. Kynes and Yoriko ask to deal with Grimlock themselves, taking him away. Asuna asks Kirito what he would do if his wife changed. He replies that he would be happy, definitely not reason enough to resort to murder. They turn around and see Griselda's ghost, and Asuna asks Kirito to friend her. Asuna visits her blacksmith friend, Liz, on her day off, missing Kirito, who shows up after she leaves. He asks if she has any swords as strong or stronger than his elucidator. She presents him with the strongest sword she has ever made. He asks to test its durability by trying to break his own sword with it. Liz is dumbfounded as she watches her sword snap in half with a single strike. If she had the right materials, she could forge a blade of equal caliber. On floor 55, there's a dragon who eats crystals and stores a rare metal in its stomach, but he needs a master smith with him to get the drop. The two ascend a snowy mountain to reach the dragon's lair, but Kirito tells Liz to hide while he fights, despite her insisting that she can help. Distracted, they both get thrown into a giant circular pit where they can't use teleportation crystals. The only way out is up. Kirito takes a running start and tries to scale the walls, to no avail. The two decide to camp out at the bottom for the night. When Liz wakes up, she finds Kirito digging through the snow. He discovers the rare ore they were after. They're in the dragon's lair, and the ore is really the dragon's excrement. It turns out they're nocturnal too, Liz mentions, as the dragon dives into the hole to greet them good morning, sending them flying. At least it's one way to get out. Liz forges the perfect sword. It's exactly what Kirito was looking for. She refuses to accept payment. Instead, she demands to become his own personal smith. Right as she begins to confess her feelings for Kirito, Asuna bursts through the door. It's pretty clear that there's something between the two of them. Almost 2 years have passed since launch, and Kirito is still flying solo. While traversing a forest, a rare animal crosses Kirito's path, a ragu rabbit. After catching it, he brings the S-rank ingredient to Egil, attempting to sell it since neither of them has a high enough cooking skill to prepare it. If only they knew someone who did. Asuna taps Kirito on the shoulder, with another Knight of the Blood Oath member in tow. She informs them that she's just maxed out her cooking skill and agrees to cook the rabbit if they split it evenly. Since Kirito doesn't have any cookware at his place, she decides to invite him over for dinner, to his surprise. She then dismisses her bodyguard, Kurodil, who takes offense that she thinks Kirito is more than capable of doing his job. After dinner, Asuna confesses that she's concerned that the game is becoming too challenging for a solo player and decides to ask, more like force, Kirito to join her and become a party of 2. The next morning, Asuna teleports to meet Kirito before they head to the dungeon, but Kurodil is close behind them and confronts Kirito, challenging him to a duel to see who is more fit to protect Asuna. The battle begins, but it's over with a single swing. Kurodil's sword is broken at the hilt, but he refuses to accept the loss. They fight their way through the dungeon on the 74th floor. Kirito is impressed and relieved to fight with someone who knows what they're doing. After a while, they come across the boss room. Teleportation crystal in hand, they push the great doors open to find a giant blue-eyed demon. The braziers light up the room, and the 2 of them turn in a panic to escape from the chamber. Asuna interrogates Kirito. Why doesn't he use a shield as a one-handed sword user? But she drops it when he becomes uncomfortable. She pulls out a picnic basket filled with food she made. She's been discovering how to emulate real-world food and flavors. Klein's guild shows up and wonders why Kirito is in a party as a solo player, especially with a girl. While the guys fawn over Asuna, the army, a guild that operates on the 1st floor, appears, demanding the map data Kirito recorded. He doesn't put up a fight, since he was going to share the information for free anyway. Noticing how beat up and exhausted the army members are, they try to warn them against tackling the boss in such a state, but the army leader ignores them and they head for the boss. Kirito and Asuna sprint to the door, hearing multiple people scream. They can't use their teleportation crystals, just like the hidden room where Kirito lost the black cats. The army group's leader goes down, dying in front of them. There's no choice but to try and save as many people as possible. Kirito holds off the boss so the others can escape. He can't let them die. He has to reveal the reason why he only uses one-handed swords. He acquired the ability to dual wield, a skill no one else has ever seen. Faster. He has to go faster. Kirito unleashes an insane flurry of blows, leaving him the only one standing, only for about 2 seconds before he collapses with only a sliver of health left. Klein demands to know what that was, a unique skill that isn't on any list or guide. Kirito must move out of his home because nobody will leave him alone after his secret is publicized. But that's not the only bad news. Asuna takes Kirito to speak with Heathcliff, the leader of the Knights of the Blood Oath. He isn't exactly thrilled that Kirito is poaching one of their best members and challenges him to a duel. If he loses, he must become a member of the guild. Kirito isn't the only one with a unique skill. Heathcliff is the sole user of Divine Blade, a skill that maximizes both attack and defense. No one's ever seen his hit points dip into the yellow zone. The arena is completely packed as both fighters prepare to duel. Kirito tries to use his speed to his advantage, but wasn't expecting the captain's shield proficiency. His guard breaks, and Kirito lands a blow. Heathcliff was not prepared for that. Another opening. This is it. But for some reason, time slows down, and his attack fails. It's over. The Knights of the Blood Oath just gained their newest member. Asuna wonders why he adamantly refuses to join a guild and learns the truth. The guilt Kirito carries for not saving the Midnight Black Cats made him swear never to join another guild. It's training time. As if anything could be worse, he's paired with Kurodil, but their superior, Godfrey, reassures Kirito. After stopping for a lunch break, Kirito notices Godfrey go down. He's paralyzed. Unable to use any crystals after relinquishing them for training, there's nothing Kirito can do while he watches Kurodil murder their superior. While making his way over to finish Kirito off, he reveals that he's actually a member of the Laughing Coffin. With his life waning fast, he refuses to die and tries to fight the paralysis. Good thing Asuna was following them the whole time. She turns her attention to her former bodyguard, but believes his feigned surrender. Right as Kurodil is about to attack Asuna, Kirito steps in, taking the blow directly to his forearm, sacrificing his right hand to save her, and viciously attacking their assailant. There's no way around it now. Kirito is a murderer. Kirito kisses Asuna to dispel any doubts, and they promise to protect each other no matter what. They spend the night together and decide to take a break from the front line for a while. He suggests they get a house by the lake on floor 22, and then they can get married. Heathcliff approves their requested time off. They buy the lake house and get married. After relaxing for a while, Kirito becomes restless. He tells Asuna he has a surprise while taking her into the woods. He heard rumors of townsfolk seeing ghosts in the forest. As soon as the words leave his mouth, Asuna spots a small girl wearing white wandering through the trees. But it's no ghost. Another player, perhaps? But she doesn't have a cursor. And yet, she's not an NPC or a quest giver. They bring her back to the cottage. In the morning, the girl finally wakes up after passing out right after they found her. Her name is Yui, but as for the rest of her memories, she can't seem to recall anything. Yui starts calling them mommy and daddy after having a tough time pronouncing Kirito. They decide to see if anyone knows her in the town of beginnings, since it's their best shot at finding her parents, or at least someone who knows her. About 30% of the players still alive are on the first floor, around 2,000. Most of the residents are low-level players who don't wish to fight, but it's also where the army has taken root. They stumble upon a patrol extorting a group of children. Asuna makes quick work of them. Suddenly, Yui starts reaching for the sky, saying something about everyone's hearts and always being in the dark, when a loud hissing white noise comes out of nowhere as Yui faints. They take Yui back to the church, where a player has been taking care of all the kids in the game, but she's never seen Yui before. Yulier, the army's second-in-command, appears at the door, thanking them for putting the soldiers in their place and requesting their help. She details how the guild has become corrupt and more brazen, sending members to their deaths on the upper floors. The massacre they witnessed was on Kibao's orders, and now he's trying to get rid of Thinker, the guild leader. He lured Thinker to a dungeon below the town of beginnings, telling him to come unarmed, just to talk. But Kibao left him there to die. Asuna is skeptical, but Yui affirms that Yulier is telling the truth. Kirito decides to take the chance, and Yui insists on joining them. Thinker is still alive in a safe zone, but when they get close, he warns that it's a trap. But it's too late. They're face to face with a boss whose level is too high for them to see. There's no way they can beat him. That is until Yui steps between them. Revealing herself to be an immortal object, she begins hovering and summons a huge flaming sword, destroying the boss with a single blow. Yui's memories are finally restored. Yui explains how the system is run by the Cardinal program and that she's an AI meant to aid players' mental states. But trapped and alone, she could only watch while her programming slowly broke down. One day, she found two players who felt joy for the first time since the game launched, Kirito and Asuna, so she set out to find them. However, when Yui uses the GM console to delete the boss, the main Cardinal program locates and begins erasing her. Kirito jumps into action. Using the GM console, he creates an in-game item containing Yui's program. After their 2-week vacation, Kirito and Asuna receive an urgent summons from Heathcliff, requesting their return to the front line. He debriefs them on the latest developments. A 20-member recon team scouted a boss. Half of them got trapped in the center of the anti-crystal boss chamber. When it was over, the room was completely empty, no trace of the players or the boss. Kirito asks Asuna to stay behind, but she tells him if anything happened, she wouldn't be able to go on living without him. The next day, everyone gathers to get ready to face the boss. Even Klein and Agil are there to help. The raid group charges into the room, but it's completely empty. Well, not completely. The Skull Reaper drops from the ceiling. It mows down players with ease, one-shotting anyone who can't negate the damage. Players are going down one after the other. But if Kirito and Asuna block together, they have a chance of survival, no matter how slim. Success. They pull off the impossible, but they still have 25 more floors left. Is it even possible to survive, let alone clear them all? Kirito notices that Heathcliff's health hasn't turned yellow. Thinking back to their duel, it suddenly hits him. He launches an attack against the captain, only to see the same immortal object indicator that Yui had. Something had been bugging Kirito. Why create an RPG if you aren't going to play it? Captain Heathcliff is Akihiko Kaiba, the creator of SAO. It first occurred to him during their duel, when Kaiba increased his speed to win, claiming that Kirito was too fast and strong. He would have lost if he didn't cheat. He confirms his true identity, revealing that he is the final boss. Kaiba always thought he'd face off with Kirito at the end. Before he leaves for the 100th floor, he gives Kirito a chance to duel. If he wins, he clears the game and all remaining players are logged out safely. Despite his friends' warnings, this could be their only chance to survive. Kirito thanks them for everything before preparing to fight Kaiba, making him promise not to allow Asuna to commit suicide should he lose. This isn't a game. This is a fight to the death. Using skills that Kaiba didn't design is his best bet, but it's not enough. He's wide open, and Kaiba is already saying sayonara. Before he can do anything, Asuna comes between them, sacrificing herself. Kaiba plunges his sword into Kirito's chest, taking his health points to 0. But Kirito refuses to die. He spears the captain with his sword, killing both of them simultaneously. He's transported to a platform in the sky, along with Asuna and Kaiba, who can't really give a good reason as to why he created SAO. It was merely to create the world he's always dreamed of, one where he was in control. Kirito and Asuna embrace, knowing that their time together was the happiest either of them had ever been, until Kazuto awakens in the hospital, determined to find Asuna in the real world. He's back at their home on the 22nd floor, sitting on their porch, with Asuna asleep beside him. Inside, an apple falls off the table. Suddenly, the world starts falling apart. The sky turns red, and space starts to crumble away. He's Kirito, dressed as the Black Swordsman again, when Kazuto wakes up with a start from another nightmare. After spending 2 years in Sword Art Online, he still hasn't fully adjusted. Sugu, his sister, still practiced kendo in between hospital visits while he was comatose. Kazuto challenges her to spar. She notes him taking an odd stance. He's still used to the weight of a real sword, but ends up losing anyway. When Sugu asks what he's up to, Kazuto looks at the ground and solemnly says he's visiting the hospital again to see Asuna. She's still in a coma 2 months after the incident. He told the Ministry of Internal Affairs everything he knew about SAO in return for her location. While visiting the hospital, Asuna's father appears, thanking him for visiting his daughter so often. He knows it would make her happy. His business partner's son, Nobuyuki Sugo, shows up ecstatic to meet the bona fide hero Kirito in person. Her father leaves the two alone, and Sugo gives up the act. Apparently, Sugo is eager to tie the knot, marrying into Asuna's family. Kazuto's face turns to horror when he mentions marrying the girl he loves. The company Argus was forced into bankruptcy, but the SAO servers were taken over by Wrecked Progress, Asuna's father's company, where Sugo works. He claims he has a right to her, since he's the one working to keep the servers alive, and Asuna by extension. Threatening Kazuto if he ever comes back to visit, he gives him the concession of inviting him to the wedding, infuriating Kazuto. Back at home, Kazuto breaks down as Sugu comforts him. It turns out that they are technically not siblings, but still, she doted on him the entire time that he was under. Unable to truly express how she feels, she also breaks down and falls asleep next to him. The next morning, Kazuto tries waking her up. When she comes to, she starts freaking out, her face turning bright red. She runs out of the room. Kazuto receives an email from Egil with a picture of someone who looks like Asuna. Kazuto goes to meet Egil, IRL, at his bar to inquire about the picture he sent. It turns out that it's a screenshot from another VR MMO, Alfheim Online, basically SAO's successor, though now with more fairies and less murder. Apparently, there's an area called the World Tree at the center of the map where the screenshot was taken. Though nobody has made it to the top, there's another screenshot of a birdcage that was taken by someone who came close. Kazuto asks to borrow Egil's copy and notices that it's made by Wrecked Progress. Sugu thinks about the night before when Kazuto shows up, startling her. He thanks her for last night. He's still not quite sure how to deal with the psychological burden the past few years have placed on his shoulders. He dons the nerve gear once again, choosing one of the 9 races, a Spriggan, naming himself Kirito. He's teleported into the game and begins falling, only to freeze mid-air. Something's not right. a black pixelated void opens, sending him to the middle of a forest. Checking the menu, he's relieved to find the choice to log out. He still has all his gear and skills from SAO. A bug? Remembering a certain unique item, he frantically searches, relieved when he finds and uses it to revive Yui. She still has her memories from SAO. After asking her to assess the system, Yui analyzes the game and finds that it's basically an SAO port. After Argus went under, Wrecked Progress took the reins. Apparently, he has the same character data, and everything that's compatible was transferred over, except for all his items, which he deletes before error detection notices. He still has his skills though. He's not a beater. He's a cheater. Yui is being identified as a navigation pixie though, and she doesn't have admin privileges. He tells her that Mommy might be trapped at the World Tree, and he's there to save her. But before they can get going, she alerts him to players in the area. 2 fairies wearing green, Lifa and Rekon, are fending off multiple enemies wearing red. When Rekon dies and Lifa becomes cornered, Kirito steps in, falls in, and overpowers them, killing 2 while the third would rather not lose anything and runs away. Lifa decides not to fight after seeing his ludicrous display, and Yui pops out, calling him daddy, which she finds odd, obviously. She teaches him to fly without using the controller, which he immediately gets the hang of, as they head to a sylph, another race's, town. Rekon is overjoyed to see Lifa, but she decides to ditch their party in favor of getting a drink with Kirito. He asks about the World Tree. Nobody has made it, since all races can only fly for a maximum of 10 minutes. Whoever's race makes it to the top first gets unlimited flight time. Kirito becomes frustrated. There must be a way to make it to the top. He has to, no matter what. Lifa is curious as to why. His demeanor changes, and he explains that there's someone he needs to find. He thanks her and walks out. But before he can leave, she stops him and offers to help. They both log off, promising to meet tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the birdcage at the top of the World Tree, someone calls the girl sitting there longingly to Tanya, indulging in her misery. She demands Sugo, the system admin, call her by her real name, Asuna. But he taunts her, saying he's Obeiron, the Fairy King, and she's his bride. He's been using 300 test subjects from SAO as guinea pigs in his experiment. He's attempting to alter people's memories and influence their emotions, and plans to take over Rekt and sell the company. Asuna threatens to call the police when she wakes up, though she's terrified when she finds out she's one of the 300. Trying to learn the door code is futile as it's blurred out. She falls to her knees, pleading for Kirito to find her and save her. Sugu fell in love with Alfheim after becoming curious about why Kazuto was so enamored with VR gaming, despite her resentment towards them for stealing 2 years of her brother's life. Rekon, Shinichi, confronts Sugu in real life, informing her that Sigurd and the rest of the party are getting together later, but she refuses to join them. Both siblings log on and meet up in-game, but before they can dip, Sigurd and 2 of his lackeys show up, demanding she stay with the party, while taking the RP in RPG a little too seriously. Lifa tells them to beat it, with Kirito backing her up. Before he can make a scene, Sigurd's henchmen remind him not to sully his name by attacking a mere Spriggan renegade, and they storm off in a ridiculously exaggerated fashion. Yet again, the pair are interrupted. This time it's Rekon, the spineless, trademarked, who bravely offers Lifa his sword, only to immediately rescind the offer to stay behind and do some recon. Sigurd and co. are acting even more, but this time it's shady. Back in the cage, Sugo is still being a creep. He continues provoking Asuna, revealing that he knows Kirito is Kazuto. He explains his plan to marry her unconscious body and even sent Kazuto an invitation. He leaves, and she learns the key code by looking in a mirror. Kirito and Lifa decide to take a rest. Since they're not in town, they have to log out separately and watch the other's avatar. Sugu goes first, almost checking on her brother, but she decides not to, confused about her feelings for both him and now Kirito. When Kirito logs off, Yui can act independently, and Lifa wonders about their relationship. Flustered when Kirito logs back on, Leafa explains tracking magic when he becomes suspicious of someone following them. They have to travel through an underground mountain pass where Kirito practices his illusion magic, which is useless in combat, according to Leafa. Yui notices around 12 players following them. Trying to hide, Kirito sees a bat with red eyes. It's salamander tracking magic. They book it to the underground town. Before they make it to the gates, a magic wall appears, blocking their way. It looks like they'll have to make a stand. Kirito tells Leafa to stay back and act as support as he charges the salamander's forces. But they're throwing everything they have at him. He gets rocked by fireballs, one after another, but he keeps getting back up. Leafa keeps healing him while telling him dying is only a minor setback. She's taken aback when his whole demeanor changes. As long as he's still kicking, nobody dies on his watch. Never again. Kirito screams while charging the salamanders. Yui realizes he's going all out and tells Leafa to use the rest of her mana pool to heal him during his next attack. Leafa doesn't really know what's going on, but shields him anyway. He's using illusion magic? Kirito turns into the blue-eyed demon, who's blue-eyed in name only, and goes berserk, killing all but one. He offers the survivor all the loot from the fight for information. Apparently, there's a salamander army on the move, but he doesn't know why. Leafa logs off and checks her phone, discovering that she has a ridiculous number of missed calls from Shinichi. She answers the next call, discovering that Sigurd is a traitor working with the salamanders. Logging back on, she tells Kirito she has to go. There's a conference between the Sylphs and the Cat Seeds, which is where the salamander army will strike, ruining any chance of an alliance. Leafa says she'd understand if Kirito switched sides for a better chance to reach the World Tree, but he explains that even if it's a virtual world, there are some things you have to protect, still feeling guilty about the blood on his hands. They make a run for the exit and fly as fast as they can to the meeting place. They make it just in time. Leafa tells the Sylphs leaders to trust him. He's their only shot at saving their peace talks. Kirito confronts Eugene, the salamander commander, claiming to be an ambassador for the Spriggan-Undine alliance. If he makes a move, all 4 factions will wage war against the salamanders. But Eugene doesn't believe a lone Spriggan with trash gear is an ambassador and challenges him. If Kirito can last 30 seconds, he'll take him at his word. Eugene's sword can phase through any sword or shield used to block it. Allegedly, he's the most powerful player. He rescinds his word after 30 seconds are up. It's a fight to the death. After disappearing in a cloud of smoke, Kirito borrows Leafa's sword and attacks from above, surprising Eugene. The sword can't phase through attacks. His dual wielding is unparalleled. After beating Eugene, the player who fled when Kirito first saved Leafa, he lies, saying he saw him with an Undine the other day. Convinced he's an ambassador, Eugene orders retreat. Leafa explains the situation to the Sylph and the Cat Seeds leaders. Sigurd's even slimier than a salamander. The Sylph's leader uses a mirror to contact him and banishes him for being a traitor. Kirito admits to making everything up, saying he's just a sword for hire. He gives them enough money to prepare for their assault on the World Tree, the reason for their alliance in the first place. Once they're ready, they promise to help him on his quest. Back at the World Tree, the bird has left the nest, or cage. When the two arrive in Ahrun, the largest city in Alfheim, and the base of the World Tree, they hear an announcement informing players that servers will be unavailable for maintenance. Asuna, now free, tries to find a GM console to log out, only to find a room filled with holographic brains seemingly in some sort of pain. It's the data center for Sugo's experiments. In the real world, Sugu is disappointed when Kazuto declines to hang out with her in favor of visiting Asuna. She asks to go to the hospital with him. On the bus, Kazuto explains that they're setting up a school specifically for SAO survivors. Meanwhile, Asuna hides from two purple creatures running the experiments. Looking for the console, she's captured before she can log out. The boss tells them to put her back in the cage and change the code. She manages to steal a GM access code. At the hospital, Sugu realizes that it might have been a mistake to go there. After they log back in, Kirito tries comforting Lifa, who breaks down, saying she just got her heart broken. Nobody can ever know she's in love with her own brother. Yui confirms that Asuna is at the top of the tree, according to her player ID. Despite knowing that flying to the top is impossible, Kirito, overwhelmed with emotions, immediately takes off without thinking. The barrier blocks him, but Yui's voice breaks through. Asuna drops the access card. Catching it only confirms his fears, making him even more determined. Lifa warns him again how impossible it is to reach the top, even with an army of players, let alone by himself. He refuses to listen and enters the dome, taking on the grand quest. With his anger fueling him, he quickly cuts down the first wave. But his will alone isn't enough to fend off the army of enemies guarding the World Tree. The screen flashes a message he thought he'd never see. You're dead. He thought he could do anything, that he was unstoppable as a solo player. But even in SAO, he couldn't do it alone. Lifa rushes in and recovers his flame before it disappears, reviving him on the steps to the dome. She tries to talk him down, but he won't listen. He has to save Asuna. Lifa is in shock. She can't believe it. Kazuto? Eyes wide, he realizes it's been Sugu the whole time. But before he can say anything, she logs out. It's not fair. She lies dazed before bursting into tears. She tells Kazuto to leave when he knocks on her door. She answers, confessing her feelings for him. She knows they're not brother and sister. He became so distant when he found out as a child. She realized she was in love with him. Jealous of the way he talks about Asuna, she tried to move on, but ended up falling in love with him all over again as Kirito. Unable to look her in the eye, he apologizes, while she tells him off and closes the door. He was only 10 when he found out. Always feeling different, he distanced himself, playing online games to cope. Kazuto tells her to meet in-game. She logs on to find Rekon, who confesses his love for her, only to be kicked down some stairs while she laughs, unsure of what to say. Lifa meets Kirito at the North Terrace of Alrun, and she challenges him to a rematch. They begin dueling, but end up embracing midair. Kirito confesses that he hasn't returned to the real world yet. He's still stuck in SAO. The game never ended for him. But if he can save Asuna, maybe he can save himself at the same time. Yui analyzes the Guardians. They're not very strong, but there are so many that beating the quest seems impossible by design. Rekon tries to help them, but the Guardians are overwhelming. Even when Rekon uses a self-destruct spell, clearing the way, the Guardians still swarm like a plague of locusts. It's hopeless, until the Sylphs and the Catseeds show up, after preparing for the raid with the money Kirito gave them. Lifa throws him her sword. With the help of the other players, he forces his way through the swarming Guardians and pierces the door in the ceiling. But Yui discovers that players aren't meant to open it. The quest really is unbeatable. If he can't beat it, it's time to cheat it. Yui uses the access card's code to override the door. He's in. They teleport to the hallway Asuna found herself in after her first attempt at escape. Yui uses her limited abilities to create a path. There's no city at the top. It's all a lie. They find Asuna, but can't log her out. She remembers where the console is, so there's a chance when Kirito suddenly falls to the floor, unable to move. Yui disappears, warning them there's something coming. It's Sugo. He taunts Kirito, revealing his experiment and the truth about Alfheim. Cackling, confident that he's won, he chains Asuna up by the wrist. Sugo stabs Kirito with his own sword while using admin privileges to decrease the pain threshold, while Kirito watches, powerless. On the verge of blacking out, Kirito hears a voice asking if he's giving up. Was their battle a joke? It's Kayaba, giving him the will to go on and his own admin privileges, which outrank Sugo's. He tries summoning Excalibur, which Kirito gladly does for him. He picks up his own sword and decreases the pain absorber to 0, enough to affect their bodies in real life. Kirito cuts him down with ease, severing his right hand. He tosses Sugo into the air, piercing him with his sword as Sugo falls, crying and screaming. After freeing Asuna, he breaks down. He's not a hero. He doesn't have any power. Regardless, he's her hero if nobody else's. She logs out, and he promises to visit her in the hospital as soon as he can. He asks Kayaba, or at least the digital ghost of whatever's left of him, if it's over, and he hands Kirito a golden egg he calls the seed. Maybe Kayaba wasn't just bored after all. Upon waking up, Sugu is standing over him, overjoyed that he's okay. Kazuto begins apologizing, but she says it's okay. Go to her, which is exactly what he does. When he arrives at the hospital, something slices his right arm. It's Sugo, stepping out of the shadows with a knife. He's lost it and threatens to kill Kazuto, calling him weak. Finding his will to live, he disarms Sugo. Overcome with rage and plagued by memories, holding the knife to Sugo's throat, Kazuto comes to his senses before following through. In the hospital, Asuna is finally awake, and they meet for real at last. A few months later, they begin their first semester at the SAO Survivors School. Sugo was arrested that night in the parking lot, and VR MMOs fell by the wayside after all the terrible tragedies and human experimentation that befell the players. Apparently, Kayaba committed suicide, but Kazuto knows he successfully uploaded his consciousness. He spoke with him when he received the World Seed, saying he'd know what to do with it. All of the players they've befriended meet up at Agil's bar. The seed has been spreading since they released it to the public. It turns out that it's a program allowing for the creation of VR MMORPGs, which are springing up all over. They even recreate the floating castle from SAO in Alfheim. This time, he swears he's going to beat all 100 floors. In the VR MMORPG Gun Gale Online, people watch as the top players speak on an MMO panel about the upcoming tournament, when a player, boasting about having real power, shoots the player on a TV airing the broadcast. The patrons in the bar begin to laugh, until the broadcast cuts away, while the player seems to suffocate. There's a mask covering the shooter's face. He calls the weapon and himself Death Gun. In the real world, Kazuto and Asuna meet up for a date 1 year after the SAO incident. They talk about how the only difference separating their world from the vast array of new virtual ones is merely the amount of data. Someday, AR might be advanced enough to revive Yui in real life. Kazuto meets with the first person who visited him in the hospital, the head of the government's VR division, Kikuoka. At a cafe, they discuss this strange occurrence of 2 top GGO players dying of heart failure. They both agree it isn't possible to stop a heart from in-game bullets. He convinces Kazuto to investigate in-game. Meanwhile, Sinon, a sniper playing GGO, picks off targets, alluding to how much easier it is to pull a virtual trigger. Using a special rifle, Hecate, a reward for killing a boss solo, Sinon hunts other players in a group, hitting the first target, an instant kill. But the party of monster hunters has a new member this time, covering their equipment with a cloak. They're moving slower than usual. When Sinon misses the cloaked figure, he reveals the minigun on his back. Live ammo, not optical rounds for hunting monsters. This guy's obviously here for PvP. One of her group members goes down before she warns them. After seeing him smile, Sinon vows to take him down. Dine, the party leader, would rather log out than face him, but Sinon says she only needs them to distract him for 3 seconds. Dine ends up sacrificing himself, but not before going out with a bang, taking 2 of them with him. She finds a new vantage point, but the hired gun spots her before getting a shot off. Taking a page out of Dine's book, she leaps from the window, directly into his line of fire. She loses a leg getting close enough to put one between his eyes, glad she could wipe the smile off his face. She takes off her ammosphere and tries to make a gun with her hand, still not quite able to. She says she needs to get stronger. In ALO, Kirito stares at the floating castle, Einkrad, having flashbacks to SAO and Kayaba. He sits up, looking at Asuna. There's something he needs to tell her. Shino is led into an alley where some girls try extorting her. She tells them off, but when one of the girls makes a gun with her hand, Shino freezes, going into shock while the girls taunt her. Someone yells for the cops, and the bullies book it. Shinkawa shows up to help Shino, and they go to a cafe to discuss the BOB tournament in GGO. He offers to walk her home. Declining, she says walking alone is necessary to become stronger. She tries to pick up a model gun from a drawer, but her hands begin to shake. Screaming, she sees flashes of a bloody face. Her dad died when she was 2. Leaving Tokyo with her mom, everything was fine, until one day they got caught up in the middle of a robbery. The robber shot the clerk after telling him not to move. Clearly unhinged, he points the gun at Shino's mother, threatening to shoot her next. Shino bites the man's hand, grabbing the pistol. He wrestles her for it. She fires once, in the gut. Reaching again, a second, through his right shoulder. Making one last feeble attempt, the third bullet, center forehead. Looking down, screaming as blood pools, everything turns red. She's back in her room, dropping the fake gun. She kisses the great white and places a cloth over the gun, putting it back. Still unable to forget the man's face, wishing someone would come save her. Kirito tells Asuna it'll only take a few days. He'll transfer over to GGO, check it out, and transfer right back. He promised Kikuoka as a favor, which is why he's using his main account. He goes to the hospital, in the off chance death gun isn't a rumor, surprised to see the same nurse who took care of him while he was in SAO and rehab. Apparently, Kikuoka spoke with her as well. She tells him to strip, for the electrodes, of course. It's not like she hasn't seen the full works. Kazuto is confident that it'll only take 4 to 5 hours tops. Shino came to Tokyo thinking it would help her panic attacks, which occur whenever she sees or hears anything resembling a gun. Shinkawa introduced her to GGO. Now she uses it as a type of therapy, thinking that winning the BOB will cure her. In a dark room, staring at their screen with the 2 dead players crossed off, the third, Sinon, unmarked, their next target. Kirito logs on to GGO, garnering a lot of attention. His avatar is more feminine than he expected. Becoming lost immediately, he spots Sinon and asks for directions. Thinking Kirito is a girl, she decides to help. He decides to keep up the act long enough to get his bearings. He just needs to sign up for the BOB and get a weapon, though she thinks he's crazy for entering the tournament after logging on for the first time. Kirito only has 1,000 credits, which will barely get him anything, especially a live ammo gun for PvP. If he wants to make quick cash, there's a gun range with an automated gunslinger. Making it to the end wins you the whole pot, but as soon as you get close, the bullet lines, trajectory markers every player can see, except for the first shot of a sniper, become almost impossible to see. They watch someone attempt it, though they can't get past the quick draw line. Of course, he gets the jackpot in one go, dodging the bullet lines instead of the bullets. Now to find him a good weapon. Kirito sees that there are photon swords. Buying one, despite Sinon telling him they're pretty much useless. At least get a mid-range gun to get in close. She chooses an FN-57 for him, but at the firing range, he can't even hit the target. Leaving the shop, Sinon notices they have 10 minutes to register. They start running, when Kirito notices some 3-wheeled bikes. They're supposed to be extremely hard to control. He just laughs it off, making up an excuse. Just in time, signing up, it asks for Kirito's real-life info. Hesitating, he quickly forgoes entering anything when Sinon surprises him, almost seeing his avatar's displayed gender. Since the game uses credits exchangeable for real currency, it feels like a separate world. Sinon admits to feeling like a different person in GGO than IRL, though quickly changes the subject. When they go to change, he has no choice but to introduce himself formally, which earns him a slap for lying about being a girl. She keeps telling him not to follow her, but he has nowhere to go. She begrudgingly explains the rules. The arenas are randomly generated, and players start at least 500 meters apart. Whoever kills the other player teleports back to the waiting room for their next match. They're in different blocks, So after the prelims, if they both make it, they'll face off in the finals. She shows Kirito her player info after swearing to kill the stronger players. He better win, since now he knows the name of the person who's going to kill him. Spiegel shows up, glad she made it in time, though he only came to watch her matches. He notices Kirito, thinking he's a she. Sinon sets him straight, and Kirito thanks her for their date as the announcement for the prelims sounds. He better be in the finals, angering her further by acting as if it's another date. Spiegel isn't too happy either. In his first match, Kirito isn't prepared for an automatic rifle, getting pinned down until he remembers how the bullet lines work. Kirito masters a lifetime's worth of ninjutsu in mere moments and detects the enemy player moving in the grass. Kirito charges, using his photon sword to deflect the bullets and pierces his opponent's chest before he can reload, winning the match. In the waiting room, Kirito runs into the player calling themselves Death Gun, feeling as if they've met somewhere before, but he can't quite place it. Death Gun asks if he's the real deal, not knowing what he means, asking again while pointing to his name, mentioning his sword skills. Then it hits Kirito. They must be an SAO survivor. But who? Catching a glimpse of their arm, he's completely rattled. It's the Laughing Coffin's emblem. He plays dumb, but Death Gun promises to kill him either way. Kirito has a panic attack, experiencing flashbacks of SAO. They weren't the only murderers. He and the other guilds led a raid on their secret base. It was a bloodbath. In the end, he killed 2 of their members. Kirito, shaking, starts to spiral, realizing that player has the same voice as Death Gun. Sinon tries talking to him. He just grabs her hand, a vacant look in his eyes. Before she can do anything, he teleports to his next match, standing for a moment, solemnly, before losing it and going all out. Sinon can't help but recognize the same thing in herself, becoming flustered while Spiegel watches intently. Sinon lets him get in her head, missing her first shot, but ultimately winning the match. It's their turn to face each other, but he reminds her of herself after seeing the look on his face, distracting her. Spawning on a bridge, Kirito slowly walks towards her. She can't hit him, running up to him, accusing him of not taking it seriously. Is it just a game to him? He promises to give her the fight she wants. They'll duel. He'll throw a bullet in the air, at 10 meters apart. When it hits the ground, it's on. She can't miss at this range. What is he thinking? She agrees, and when the bullet hits the ground, she fires. He cuts the round in half, holding his blade to her neck. She can't believe it. How did he predict where she was aiming? By following her eye through the scope? But that's not a skill. It shouldn't be possible. What is this crazy VR ninjutsu nonsense? Sinon wants to know how to obtain such strength. That's why she's here. But he tells her it's not strength. If she knew the person at the other end would die if she pulled the trigger, could she go through with it? Does he know about her past? No. He avoids eye contact, admitting that he couldn't. Not again. Not after killing 3 people. He doesn't even know their names. She forfeits the match, promising to win in the finals, as Death Gun watches the screen ominously. Sugu points out Kazuto's position on the BOB tournament list. There aren't many players calling themselves Kirito. That and she may have called Asuna. Worried about him, she says he had the same look on his face last night as he did after the SAO incident, telling her it's fine. He'll transfer back after the tournament. There's only 1 day left. Shino, irate, unable to calm down, rants about Kirito to Kyoji. He infuriates her. Who does he think he is? Kyoji tries calming her down. She's not acting like herself. She's never talked about someone this much. She'll destroy him in the finals, taking aim with her index finger, making a finger gun without flinching in her fit of rage. Grabbing her hand, he tries to express his feelings. Going in for a hug, she pushes him away. She isn't ready yet, and asks if he can wait for her. Kirito has nightmares about murdering those players, unable to remember their faces. At the hospital, he asks Aki about remembering those who died under her care. What kind of person does it make him, forgetting the names and faces of the players he killed in SAO? Since it affects him that much, she says it means he cares. He should remember why he did it and the people he saved along the way. In ALO, Asuna spaces out. Reminded of the tournament, she goes to watch it with their friends. Back in GGO, Spiegel tries to comfort Sinon, but she refuses his touch again, saying she needs to focus. Kirito remembers Deathgun's threat. He needs to figure out his avatar's name to thwart his plans. Sinon reluctantly agrees to share info, explaining how the Battle Royale works. Each player starts 1 kilometer away in a multi-terrain arena, with a satellite revealing the player's locations every 15 minutes. The last one standing wins. She tries leaving, but he catches her, wanting to discuss the real reason why he wanted to talk. How many players does she not recognize? A strange question, but easy enough. Jushi X, Pale Rider, and Sturban. Wondering if one of them is Deathgun, Sinon gets mad, demanding to know why. Kirito confesses that one of them might be someone who he fought to the death in another game. She almost opens up, but decides against it, making him promise to stay alive until the end for their duel. Sinon sees Dine running from Pale Rider on her radar. Deciding to take advantage, she sets up a vantage point as they make their final stand. Pale Rider is extremely dexterous, able to quickly close the distance, killing Dine at close range, executing him. Suddenly, Pale Rider goes down, but there isn't a player around for miles, except for Kirito sneaking up on her. He avoided detection while underwater. There wasn't a gunshot, but it looks like there's a paralyzing dart in his shoulder. Deathgun appears out of nowhere, slowly walking towards Pale Rider, pulling out a pistol, making a cross with his hand as if in prayer. Kirito frantically tells Sinon to shoot. They can't let him use that gun. In ALO, Kirito's friends watch the bridge battle, becoming nervous when Deathgun appears. Sinon takes aim, but Deathgun dodges, shooting Pale Rider, who disconnects. Deathgun announces himself. Klein drops his drink, recognizing the phrase, "It's showtime," as one of the members of Laughing Coffin's catchphrase. Kirito tells Sinon to stay away from Deathgun. Players have been dying IRL after one shot from his handgun. Refusing to let him go alone, they team up for now. A player shows up, and Kirito blocks his shots while Sinon takes aim, sniping him. They figure Deathgun is using the river to avoid detection. After seeing the events on screen and Klein's comments, Asuna logs out to speak with Kikuoka to find out why he really hired Kirito. Making it to the city, they only see Jushi X on the scan. Thinking it's him and seeing the barrel of Deathgun's rifle, Kirito asks her to watch his back while getting in close. But as soon as he's gone, Sinon becomes paralyzed, a dart in her left shoulder. Deathgun approaches, calling Kirito out. He wants to know if it's really the same swordsman from that day, wanting to see the fury and rage behind his blade. If killing his friend is what it takes, then so be it. Sinon notices the gun he's using, the Type 54 Black Star, the same gun she killed the robber with as a child. It's not the dart that's paralyzing her anymore. Seeing the man's face reflected back at her in Deathgun's empty, glowing red eyes. A shot rings out. It's Kirito throwing a smoke bomb. Picking up Sinon, he looks for an escape route. Spotting some vehicles, they get on a similar bike from before. Sinon notes the horse is faster but harder to handle. Kirito tells her to destroy it while they drive away. She can't pull the trigger. Why now, when she needs it the most? Deathgun mounts the horse and makes chase. He's gaining on them. Kirito yells, "Shoot him!" Making the shot doesn't matter. They need a distraction. But she can't pull the trigger. It's as if her body won't let her, losing the will to fight. If she won't, then he will. No, only Sinon can use Hecate. It's a part of her. They'll do it together then. She takes aim while he helps pull the trigger. Too shaky. Can't get him in her scope. Kirito counts down. She'll have her chance in a moment. The bike goes over a ramp, airborne. She wonders how he's so calm in a moment like this, realizing his strength comes from going all out when he fights. No holds barred, no matter what. They pull the trigger together. It's a miss. Close enough though. The bullet enters a wrecked car, igniting the gas tank, watching it explode while Deathgun is enveloped in flames. They escape into the desert, though too exposed. Sinon notices a cave nearby, They can avoid the next satellite scan there. Sinon confirms that there's a cloaking skill. That's how he appears out of nowhere. But the sand makes it almost impossible to avoid detection. They'll see footprints, or at least hear his steps. Wondering whether Deathgun made it out alive, Kirito is certain he did, having seen him jump off the horse at the last second. But how did he know it wasn't Jushi X and get to her so fast? Jushi X was a woman, and he could see Sinon lying on the ground, so he picked up her gear and started shooting and throwing grenades. He tries consoling her, deciding to go after Deathgun alone. Isn't he scared? Of course he is. Who isn't afraid to die? But he can't just sit back waiting for the tournament to end, putting other players at risk. Sinon's no good at close quarters though. She doesn't care if she dies. She's weaker than she was back then. She'd rather be dead. He refuses to let her die alone. There's no such thing. It burns a hole in the memories of those you know. No one can die alone. A piece of everyone you know dies with you. If that's the case, then he can protect her for the rest of her life. He doesn't understand. Is he going to hold blood-soaked hands? Crying and beating on his chest, yelling she hates him. She reveals what she did as a child. When Deathgun was chasing them, she wasn't Sinon. She was that scared little kid. He understands all too well. He's a survivor of SAO, and so is Deathgun. He managed to block it out until he came face to face with him before the tournament. How did he get over it? He admits that he still has nightmares. Seeing their faces, hearing their last words, the only thing you can do is accept it. But right now, there's someone trying to murder them. How does he pull it off though? You can't stop someone's heart by shooting them in-game. Wait a second. Deathgun switched to his rifle when shooting Kirito. So there are rules, or a system he follows. If he saw the players input their real data while signing up for the tournament, he would know where they live. But he can't be in two places at once. There's an accomplice in the real world. Putting on an act in front of an audience gives him the opportunity to check the time and coordinate with his partner. The victims lived alone, with shoddy locks. Being unconscious, they wouldn't even know. Sinon begins to panic. Her heart rate increases rapidly. She needs to calm down or she'll automatically log out, waking up to someone waiting to kill her. Meanwhile, in ALO, Kikuoka shows up. They demand to know what's happening. Before explaining, Yui lays out all the information about the GGO incidents. It's too late to do anything now. All they can do is watch. Asuna won't accept that, getting Kazuto's location out of him. Kirito calms Sinon down. If there really is someone in her apartment, they need to come up with a plan. They can't kill her if she avoids getting shot, so he'll act as bait. She will lie in wait. They notice the live stream camera above, hoping nobody hears them. The scan shows 24 players dead, showing 2 players on the map. Accounting for the deaths he's aware of, there's 1 missing. There might be more than 1 person IRL carrying out the killings. Sinon plans to take out Yamakaze, so Deathgun can't. But he's too fast. She has to wait until he slows down to shoot. Kirito uses his crazy ninjutsu nonsense from the first round, realizing that focusing on their intent to kill gives him superpowers, apparently. A shot rings out. He barely dodges Deathgun's bullet. Yamakaze notices, taking cover. Perfect. Sinon has a stationary target, taking him out. Now that they know the other's location, Deathgun and Sinon have each other in their sights, firing simultaneously. The bullets rip through both of their scopes. It's up to Kirito now. Making a mad dash towards Deathgun, who unsheathes a blade from the stock of his ruined rifle, stabbing Kirito in the shoulder. Asuna arrives at the hospital. Kazuto's covered in sweat, heart rate spiking. Noticing the player's handle, Sturban, the nurse explains it's a German term used when patients die. Kirito confronts Deathgun, explaining his theory on the killings. But there's something he's missing. If he knew his SAO handle, Deathgun laughs. He'll never remember. Kirito told him not to bother telling him, thinking they'd never meet again. In the hospital, Kazuto isn't looking too hot. Well, actually he's way too hot. He's burning up. There's nothing they can do. Asuna only hopes he feels her hand on his. Kirito remembers. He's blocking it out. There was a briefing before they attacked Laughing Coffin. Red Eyes. His SAO handle, Red-Eyed Saza. Deathgun is taken aback. Enough of a distraction for Sinon to get a bullet line trained on him. No scope, a phantom bullet. Deathgun evades, dodging backwards. He cloaks himself. Kirito can't quite reach him, though he still has a sidearm, drawing his pistol, firing a few rounds to stop him from cloaking. Kirito severs him in half at the waist with his photon sword, winning a duel of the fates. But he warns Kirito that it's not over yet. Then Sinon catches up, figuring out how they should end the tournament, tossing a live grenade to Kirito and hugging him while he juggles it. The first BOB ended with 2 winners in a similar fashion. Shino wakes up to an empty apartment, relief washing over her. Someone rings her doorbell. She freezes until she hears Kyoji's voice. Letting him in, he begins acting strange, saying that she promised she'd be his if he waited. She pushes him off. He takes out a syringe, revealing himself to be Deathgun's partner. He's lost it, overcome by his obsession with Shino. Retreating into her own mind, wishing it was over. But after everything in GGO, she finds the strength to fight back. But he grabs her and Kazuto busts through the door, wrestling him off her. Kyoji gets on top of him, pulling out the syringe. Shino grabs a radio, bashing Kyoji on the back of the head, knocking him out. She notices Kazuto still has an electrode from the hospital on his chest, conveniently where the syringe hit. He's fine. Shino stands up to her bullies for the first time, finally able to hold her own in the presence of a gun. She takes it, schooling her on how to use it, though it's only a BB gun. Kazuto and Shino meet with Kikuoka at a cafe. Apparently, Kyoji's older brother was Zexi from Laughing Coffin. He confessed everything. How they used their father's position at the hospital to gain access to the drugs, and meticulously researched their victims, acting with a second ex-member of Laughing Coffin. It seems like all 3 left the real world behind, unable to distinguish it from their virtual selves. The 3rd member is still at large, and Laughing Coffin isn't done with Kirito. They give Kikuoka a note, telling Kirito to wait until it's showtime. Kazuto brings Shino to Agil's bar, where she meets Asuna and Liz from SAO. She becomes uncomfortable when he admits telling them about what she did as a kid, but he pleads with her to stay. There's someone she needs to meet. A mother and daughter walk through the back door and sit down. In tears, the mother tells Shino she was working at the post office the day of the robbery. She was pregnant with her daughter at the time. She apologizes for not thanking her sooner. If she hadn't done something to stop the robber, her daughter wouldn't be there to thank her in person. The little girl hands her a hand-drawn picture, thanking her for saving them. Shino breaks down, and Kazuto tells her she has to forgive herself. There was more than one person that day. She can't forget the life she took, but at least she can remember those she saved. Thank you for sticking until the end. Subscribe for more videos like this.